Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Market Performance and Planning Forum, Quarter 4. My name is Brenda Marquez on behalf of the California ISO Stakeholder Affairs Group. We welcome you to our quarterly forum. Today's meeting, we will kick things off with a few media reminders as this call is being recorded for informational and communities purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. During this meeting, we are encouraging a lot of questions and dialogue between our stakeholders, both verbal and chat. We will go over those instructions in 1 second about how to submit questions through the verbal queue. And we also encourage that all comments are professional, respectful for both the speakers and the audience who are listening in. As well, if you have any questions that require a little bit more dialogue, we will send you those correct email links and also the process of where we can submit more questions for further ask. And also, we do have an upcoming quarterly forum and next year, so that would also be a great opportunity to follow up on any questions we'll ask in this meeting. Next, we do want to go over the quick instructions to raising your hand. During the raising your hand, you will see it open participant chat windows on the bottom right corner of your screen. Folks that are not able to see it, you have to do that 3 little dots and you'll open it up. You'll see that raise hand icon located there. Once you would like to ask a question, just click on it once and then it will allow you to be added to queue. Make sure you provide your full name and affiliation, company name to let us know who's speaking. And then after your question is done, you could also lower your hand so we can know that you don't have any follow-up questions. Also, if you're dialed in through the phone line, we do have *3 available for the dialed in through your mobile device, and that will allow us to ask if you want to ask your question. So my event producer is Brian. He'll be there to facilitate us for any questions through the process of the WebEx. At this time, we'll go ahead and kick things off with the Market Performance and Planning Forum, where we'll be planning to share a lot of upcoming release plans and other processes, and also a lot of projects and initiatives that are coming in 2025, as well expanding on after 2025. So we'll make sure we clarify any timelines and also policy discussions, and also upcoming meetings and working groups that are associated to our stakeholder process. At this time, we will go ahead and review our agenda for today. Today's agenda, we will have covering for about 2 hours the market performance update, and the market performance and update will be provided by Guillermo and his team. He's our director for market performance and advanced analytics, and his team will be sharing a few topics that we'll be covering in 2 more slides, and then we'll kick things over to Amber Motley's team for short-term forecasting, and they'll be covering also a few topics for today. And at about 11 o'clock, we'll switch over to Becky Robinson for market policy and development. We also have Amelia Blanky, who's also here to support for questions within her presentation. So we'll be covering that as well. And then during the call for today, we don't have a release update, but we'll be sharing a few updates that are coming up at the next release user group that will be on the 19th next week. So I'll cover that later on. And then also we'll be sharing the 2025 Market Performance and Planning Forum schedule, just to give everyone a high level where we stand within that meeting structure for the year. And then when our presenters do speak, please be sure to introduce yourself and your title to provide our audience a better awareness of who you are. And then we'll be adding a few folks along the panelist group from the California ISO. And so just a reminder, make sure you state full name and affiliation before speaking. And at this time, I'll go ahead and introduce Guillermo. He will be presenting, kick things off for his team today.
Thank you, Brenda. Can we go back 1 slide just to go through the agenda for this market update? Sorry, one slide ahead. Next one, please. We have a few items in the agenda for this market update, and some of those are very standard to the updates that we have provided in the past. You may recall that we have this dedicated report for the summer conditions going from June through September of every year. And we completed the analysis for September. We posted that by the end of October. We didn't have an explicit call to go over the assessment of the September performance, and instead we are using this MPPF to go quickly through the month of September. After that, we're going to go through a discussion of the enhancement that was implemented back in November 16, just a month ago, for the shaping factors. This is a logic that was enhanced and that has impact on the maximum import bid price that is used for the sub-bid cap. We have some material to assess how it has been performing since the implementation of the new enhancement in mid-November. Then we will move to 3 different market issues that we want to socialize with the market. These are specific issues that we track, and I think we have enough material to give an update on these 3 items. Then we have a short update about the load conformance that has been an interesting topic for some time now in the CAISO updates, and it continues to be a focus of interest for the ISO. Then we have 2 more topics that are kind of a standard material. One is the flexible ramping product, and we also want to emphasize at the end of that section one of the most significant items that we have identified through the assessment and monitoring of that feature that has some relationship with the energy storage resources. The next topic that is energy storage resources just provides a standard update of the metrics that we have been providing for some time. Similarly, the last 2 topics that are the gas, power prices, and the wholesale costs is a standard update that we provide just to give you a appraisal of how the dynamics of these items have been for some time. The last bullet refers to the standard metrics that we put in somehow a type of appendix. These are specific metrics that we keep track consistently. We do not go specifically into deep details and discussion of these metrics. It is mainly for your information. If there is any specific questions, we may be able to address those through the call. And different staff of the ISO are going to be covering the different topics, and they are going to come in and out. And with this, let's move into the discussion. Brenda, we can go with the first topic, that is the next slide, please, regarding the September performance report. September happens to be the month where we actually peak for the year. We have a peak observed on September 5th at basically 48,000 megawatts. That is one of the highest demand peaks that we have observed in recent years, not as high as the all-time record that we have of 52,000 back in 2022. Still, 48,000 megawatts is a very reasonable level of demand peak to be observed in early September. This illustration provides this trend of the distribution of the demand levels, not only the peaks, but every single demand summarized in a distribution shape, just to give you some sense of how the demand level moves along the summer conditions, along the summer months. And we capture simply July through September, because that is typically when somehow we're going to observe the peak for the ISO system. The illustration is color-coded to indicate that the more the red, the higher the demand level. And in reference to this year, you can see how close it came to other high records that we have in the past. Notably, the peak that we have back in 2022 happens to be still the all-time record of 52,000 megawatts. In terms of the distribution, this is kind of interesting in September, because September, for many different conditions, weather conditions, happens to be one of the months where we likely see the peak of the year. But it is also a transition month. We can see that conditions change dramatically, very quickly in terms of the demand behavior, even though you may see the peak of the year early in the month. Very quickly and towards the end of the month, we start getting very moderate demand. And that's the reason you can see this type of skew right tail distribution, where you have a meaningful amount of demand values concentrated in the low range, in the blue, and then very few records that make this long tail towards the right. to represent that, yes, there are few hours in very few days where we actually reach the peak. So it's a very typical profile that we see when you compare basically all the September months. It's slightly different to the distribution profile that you see for July and August, where it's consistently in a tighter range of the demand. Next slide, please. Now, more specific to September, there are a couple of metrics that we keep track of that, and one of them is relative to the CEC forecast that is used for the RA provision, how we came for that peak demand. Specific for December, the CEC forecast was in the range of 47,000 megawatts. We peaked higher than that at 48,300. However, when you look at the lower part, that is the trend of the RA showings, we do have enough RA capacity to be able to cover the CAISO load obligation. That includes basically the demand plus the operating reserves. The operating reserves is a small percentage that is highlighted in orange, and you can see that the two together, the demand plus the operating reserves, are at all times through the period of August and September below the RA showing level. And that gives you a reference of how strong, how robust the RA mix was to be able to sustain the demand that we observed for this year. And in large part, that is part of that is the reason why we didn't have any tight supply conditions to the extent that we have observed in previous years. Next slide, please. This gives you a relative comparison. This just compares the two immediate months, August and September. Yes, September happened to have higher RA levels. And between the two adjacent years, 2024 and 2023. And they were slightly higher in 2024. When you look at specifically the numbers, we have a RA for the month of September in the range of 53,000 megawatts, slightly lower than the upper 52,000 megawatts of September of last year. Next slide, please. The composition of RA is always interesting to appreciate, and it changes year to year, month to month, and as we have this quick trend of the resource mix changing, that is going to be reflected in the RA mix. For this comparison that we have between the September of 2023 and 2024, you can see that even though the levels at the system level were about the same, slightly higher for 2024, the composition is interesting because we saw a significant decrease of gas RA in the range of 3,500 megawatts and slightly higher imports, but the most significant increase happens to be in the storage resources. That aligns with the recent trend that we have seen of quickly penetration of storage resources exceeding the 10,000 mark somewhere in 2024. And that is a very marked change of profile that we continue to see. Next slide, please. When it comes closer to the actual operation of the market, the RA showing is this projection monthly picture of how much RA capacity we have. As things start to evolve and come closer to the actual operation of the system, outages happen, things happen that may vary to the ideal mark of the RA showings. One of the metrics that we have tracked is effectively by the time we are running the day-ahead market, how much of that RA capacity and even non-RA capacity is actually available for the day-ahead market to use to meet the load obligation of the CAISO area. This is a busy graph, but it contains two dimensions of information. One is the supply, shown with the areas in green and blue. The blue for the RA, the green for the non-RA capacity. And that captures on an hourly basis all the available supply that is available in the day-ahead time frame to meet the load obligation. The trends with the different lines, the purple and the dotted line, stands for one, the load forecast plus the operating reserves obligation that we have. That is effectively the obligation we have to meet in the day-ahead market. And the dotted line adds also the self-schedule, the high-priority self-schedule that are accounting for this capacity that is supported by non-array resources. When you look at the profile over the month, we can see that, yes, when we observe the peak for the year that was in early September, that is when the demand goes high and starts getting closer to the edge of the array capacity. And then conditions subside as we leave the summer period and enter into cooler, more moderate demand levels for the rest of the month. So, but even though we reached these higher levels in early September, you can see that generally speaking, there was enough capacity, enough supply to be able to meet the load obligation. Next slide, please. One of the dynamics that comes with the balancing of supply and demand is reflected through prices. Prices are a very good indication of the conditions of supply meeting demand. Not surprisingly, we could see that in early September, we see this as a moderate bump of prices across the market for when we observe the peaking conditions. When we see the hourly profile, it's very standard to see this shape of the curve. When we reach the valley, lowest prices in the middle of the day, given the penetration of solar, and then ramping through the afternoon to reach the peak when we observe the highest prices in the day. And not surprisingly, the real-time prices may track slightly different to the day-ahead prices. So all this really captures the dynamics of supply and demand through the market operation. Next slide, please. The prices, when it comes to the wider footprint of the Western energy imbalance market, also follow similar trends. Granted, there may be regional differences just because of the mix of supply and demand in those different regions. But generally speaking, you can see that conditions happen to be following very similar trends, where we have higher prices in the evening, in the ramping periods, and then through the period of time that we report, prices tend to be higher during the days where we hit higher demand levels. Next slide, please. Now, this is another metric that we keep track, and that is the level of outages associated with array capacity. It's typical that we are going to observe on average, outages in the range of 5,000, 6,000 megawatts. That is expected given the conditions, given the magnitude of supply that we have in the system. So nothing really surprising. If we look at, for instance, the days where we have the peaking conditions that happens to be around early September, the level of outages in the system was nothing out of the ordinary for the time where we peak in the system. Next slide, please. Another area that we track is the array coming from the imports. These are CPUC jurisdictional imports, and only for the days and hours where the obligation is in place. Basically, it's weekdays for the peak hours. And there is a different breakdown that we have for classifying the array imports. It is the portion that is bidding at zero or below. There is a portion that we also track whether they are self-scheduling. And then we also track any array import that is bidding above zero. For the whole summer, not just for September, we can see that over 99% of the time of the capacity that is array imports have been participating in both the day ahead and the real-time market with either self-schedules or bids at zero or below zero. And that is the expectation. So it is a very good performance that we see in that regard. Next slide, please. Another area of interest historically for the summer conditions has been the level of exports. You can see that it's very dynamic. The export trend really follows the overall dynamics of the West and supply and demand conditions. It is not surprising that when we see higher demands in the CAISO, most likely other areas in the West are going to be also experiencing relatively high demands. And therefore, it is a time when we also expect to see a moderate increase of export participating in the market. And September was not the exception. You can see that prior to the peak of early September, we have modest levels of exports coming into the CAISO area, into the CAISO market. And then they spike around the time when we see the peaking conditions of the system, and then subsiding towards the middle of the month. Another association we can make with the dynamics of the wider West has to be with the external prices. We do track the prices, the bilateral prices through the ICE and trading. And the lower part is a simple comparison of the prices that we have in the CAISO. We just take a simple reference of the southern part of the system, SCE lab, and compare that against the bilateral prices on Palo Verde and also SP15. Most of the time they are going to track. There are conditions where they can diverge. Typically, those conditions happen to be during the peak days, right? It can go either way. And in this case, we generally see good convergence between the bilateral prices and the CAISO prices for most of the month, with the exception of the most critical time, that was the early September peaking conditions, where the bilateral prices happen to be actually higher than the CAISO-generated prices. Next slide, please. The other area of interest for the summer conditions is about the treatment of the will-through transactions. We continue to support economic will-through, low priority will-through, and the high priority will-through that have this ex-ante process of assignment of priorities. Even though it's a relatively cooler, more moderate demand month of September, we did see some reasonable level of will-through transactions happening through the system. The maximum of level of high priority wills reached the 500 megawatt mark. And you can see through the month, and there is a very consistent amount of volume of will-through happening through the system. Similar to previous summers, we didn't experience any reductions of will-through transactions, at least for the high priorities. We did see a very small participation of low priority will-through, and effectively, we didn't have economic participation of will-through transactions. Next slide, please. The last piece is how expensive was operating the CAISO market during summer conditions. This picture tries to capture that idea through the wholesale market cost. We have different metrics. Some of those may be updated as we have more cycles of the settlements. The earlier the information, the more potential to change given the settlements and cycles that we have. But still, it gives you a good sense of the dynamics of the cost that largely are going to follow the dynamics of the demand conditions. Not surprisingly, the highest cost that we have to settle in the overall wholesale market happens around the September 5th date when we peak. That is the time when we have the highest demand, the largest volume of energy to be transacted, and naturally is going to be typically at the higher level of prices that we have. So higher demand at higher prices is going to give you naturally higher wholesale cost. And for September 5th, the daily cost, the total cost for the day was over $100 million. Typically, the daily average cost may be in the range of $40, $30 million, depending on the season. That just gives you a sense of how expensive was the peaking conditions of the system. The upper trend shows you the composition of the offset. This is more of a real-time metric. Nothing surprising here. There seems to be some increase of the real-time energy and congestion offset around the peaking conditions is not surprising, but nothing out of the ordinary. Next slide, please. And the last piece is about the real-time condition. This is more about the Western Energy Imbalance Market. We have this program that has been in place for over a year, which is the Assistant Energy Transfer Program, which is a program that any balancing area participating in the EIM market can opt in. And once they opt in, basically that enables them to access potentially additional transfers under the condition of a failure. That is precisely the reason and the motivation to have this program in, that when potentially an entity is failing, signaling that there could be tight or insufficient supply to balance the area, this is the time when you may need the most additional transfers. So it comes with a charge implication because there is a settlement after the fact based on the transfers that were gained by opting in. For the summer in general, I would say this was the highest level of participation we have observed so far. At some point in the summer, we have up to 10 different balancing areas, including the CAISO, that opted in for this program. For September, I believe there were up to 9 different balancing areas opting in, and the information here is a little bit cryptic, but the color boxes stand for the days in which any entity opted in for the program. And then the black dots inside of any box stands for the cases where they have opted in and actually they failed in one of the tests. That is the combination of conditions where really the AAT program is meaningful because it is going to provide that additional flexibility to gain additional transfers under the failure condition. The summer, given the highest participation, is also the time where we have seen the largest accrual of surcharge. For the 2 months of August and September, the total charges were about 720,000 megawatts. I recall that the total charges that we have since the inception of this program is about $1.8 million. So it's about a half of the cost that accrued during the summer conditions. Not surprisingly, this is the time when you really need that condition, that ability and flexibility, and therefore it's going to be meaningful not only for the actual gain of the transfers, but also is going to be reflected in the cost associated with having that program in place. Can we move one more slide? I believe this is the last one for the first section. Brenda, I think we have a good pause here to see if we have any questions on this first topic. I don't see any hands. Brenda, do we have anything on the phone?
Looks like we do have a chat question that came in from Kyle. His question is, my understanding is that the Strategic Reliability Reserve was activated at least once in Q3. However, was the Strategic Reliability Reserve ever dispatched during Q3?
Yeah, and we provide some information. Yeah, retrospectively, maybe we should have added one slide here. We provide information in the September report. We provide a description of the days and the instances and the reasons why we dispatch strategic reserves. And I believe we also put some information about the dispatch. If not there, we will find a natural opportunity to bring that information. But yes, we did dispatch strategic reserves in early September.
Okay, it looks like that was the only question that came in. I do not see any hands raised either.
Okay, thank you. Then I will pass it to Mihir to cover the next topic.
So you can hear me, please, can you confirm?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning. Mihir Shah, Market Analysis. Wanted to take this opportunity to cover some updates since we implemented the shaping factor enhancement that Guillermo just mentioned. So in this section, I'll review the enhancements that we've made to the hourly energy shaping factor, which we implemented in November, and we'll compare how this new shaping factor performed since then compared to the previous shaping factor, and then how that also translated into the performance of the maximum import bid price. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. But first, a quick review of FERC Order 831 to lay some context on the shaping factor and the maximum import bid price, which the shaping factor is used for. FERC 831 required that the ISOs and RTOs cost verify energy bids above $1,000 up to $2,000 per megawatt hour for various resources like imports, exports, virtuals, reliability, demand responses, and other non-resource specific resources. But also, effective August 1st, CAISO implemented a new real-time energy bid cap for storage resources to be able to bid above $1,000. And CAISO is using the max import bid price for both of these to screen the imports and virtuals and other non-resource specific resources bids above 1,000, and also in the new real-time energy bid cap for storage resources that was implemented August 1st. The reason why the MIBP is used is because it's intended to represent prevailing energy prices outside of the CAISO area. These prevailing energy prices in the max import bid price are represented by two main bilateral power hubs, which are Mid-C and Palo Verde. However, the bilateral power prices for these hubs are published in multi-hour blocks, while the max import bid price needs to be an hourly value. So therefore, this hourly energy shaping factor is intended to provide a pre-market estimation of CAISO prices and so that we can decompose these block bilateral power prices into an hourly curve and reflect the fact that CAISO prices are hourly. Let's go to the next slide, please. And as part of the May 28th maximum import bid price analysis workshop, the CAISO heard feedback from stakeholders regarding the robustness of the former shaping factor calculation. The implications of the formulation at that time and now the current formulation were explored and compared to see the differences between the two formulations. Stakeholders did provide feedback regarding the formulation, and improvements to the shaping factor were highlighted. Specifically, the alignment of the days used in the shaping factor was the opportunity for improvement. We implemented that enhancement in mid-November, and the new shaping factor values were effective in the market on trade day 11/16 for the day-ahead market. Now let's go to the next slide, please. This slide describes exactly what the difference in the methodology that was implemented is. The shape of the prices, the numerator is the difference between the two formulations. So the two boxes shown here, the current formulation and the previous formulation, you'll notice that the numerator is what's different, where the current formulation uses the hourly day-ahead SMEC from the high price day, while the previous formulation used an hourly day-ahead SMEC from the most recent day. With the current formulation, the numerator and denominator are aligned to refer to the same high price day. Meanwhile, the previous formulation referred to two different days. The shape of the prices during high price days can be different than non-high price days. So only using the most recent day's SMEC, like in the previous case, may yield a shape that was not necessarily representative of coming high price conditions. And so the current formulation, which is using the high price day in the calculation in the numerator, is it has the benefit of being able to more closely mimic what the expected prices would be at the onset of a high price event. Important to note that maximum board bid price calculation is not changing, just the hourly energy shaping factor, or did not change, excuse me. Next slide, please. The shaping factor did need to account for a number of nuanced conditions that will occur during the year that are described here. For instance, issues with daylight savings time and with peak and off-peak periods, also with seasonality during the winter and the summer. The occurrences for these situations may happen relatively infrequently or may only happen for a small time of period during the year, but it's still really important to account for these clearly and intentionally, especially as the scope of how the maximum board bid price is used has been expanding from screening of non-resource specific bids to now a bid cap for energy storage resources. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, at this point, I will continue with the analysis and the summary of the performance of the new shaping factor. The current shaping factor values average to 1 as intended. The previous shaping factor values did not. And secondly, since the enhancement was implemented, we're seeing that the shaping factor values for the new methodology are higher than they would have been using the previous methodology. Consequently, the maximum import bid price values are also higher as a result, since the maximum import bid price relies on the shaping factor. The hourly energy shaping factor on its own is less helpful. Really, the best assessment of the hourly energy shaping factor is in how it impacts these final maximum import bid price values, and we will see that in the next coming slides. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the shaping factor on the y-axis and how it has changed during the month of November. The shaping factor logic enhancements were implemented effective trade date 11/16, and you can clearly see that the values changed to have an average of 1. That line within the box plot, the horizontal line in the middle of the box, is equal to 1, and the values are varying above and below it, such that the average over the whole day is equal to 1. The other thing to notice is that the shaping factor values are identical for every day since November 16th, and that's to be expected because it's relying on the same high price day SMEC, which did not change during this period. Let's go to the next slide, please. This slide is similar to the previous slide, but it now compares what the current shaping factor is to what the previous shaping factor would have been. The blue bars and blue boxes are the current shaping factor with the new logic, and the yellow bars are the previous shaping factor. You can see again, effective trade date 11/16, the divergence between the two values, and more importantly, you can see how the current or the new shaping factor values are higher consistently than the previous shaping factor values. Again, this is not necessarily surprising because the day-ahead SMEC of the high price day in the current shaping factor is higher than any of the recent days day-ahead SMEC values that would have been used in the previous shaping factor. The only instance where the current and the previous shaping factor values would be identical is at the onset of the high price conditions, when the numerator, the high price day, is the same day in both the formulations. One other note, the previous shaping factor fluctuated above and below values around 0.2, 0.3, you can see from this chart, while the current shaping factor values fluctuate around an average of 1. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. In this slide, I show normalized shaping factor comparison. There are 9 charts that represent different days during the month of November. We have a blue line, which is the normalized current shaping factor. the current shaping factor already averages to 1, and then the yellow line is the normalized previous shaping factor. The trends that we see from looking at these charts is that essentially the two curves are divergent on every single day. There's some days where the current shaping factor, the normalized current shaping factor is higher than the normalized previous shaping factor in the early hours of the day, but in other days that trend reverses. Similarly, as you can see, during the peak hours of the day, sometimes the normalized current shaping factor is higher than the normalized previous shaping factor. This is not unexpected, is a reflection of the trends in the day-ahead SMEC values from the different days. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. The next two slides are going to cover the maximum import bid price values that are based on those shaping factor values. In this slide, we show the maximum import bid price value on the y-axis. The blue bars, again, are for the new formulation of the shaping factor, and the yellow bars are the MIBP using the old shaping factor. Again, we can see the divergence since trade date 11/16, where the maximum import bid price values are consistently higher than the previous maximum import bid price values, the same trend that we saw with the hourly energy shaping factor. We should expect to see the same trend because the maximum import bid price relies directly on the hourly energy shaping factor. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. This is my final slide, and this is a comparison, just like we did for the shaping factor, of the maximum import bid price for the same days, from November 22nd to November 30th. The y-axis is the maximum import bid price. This is an hourly trend. The consistent behavior that we see is the maximum import bid price currently is higher than what it would have been using the previous maximum import bid price formulation, or the previous hourly energy shaping factor formulation, excuse me, which is a similar behavior that we just saw in the previous slide, but we can see on an hourly trend how these two compare. That is my last slide. I think we can take any questions if there are.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So we do have Alva Savoda from PG&E. He has a question. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and mute him. And let us know, Alva, what slide you will be speaking on so we can go to that slide.
Okay, Alva, you're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
This is not in reference to any slide, but thank you, Brenda, for that, inviting me to do that. What I was curious about here is, this is really great and very transparent. Really appreciate you going through all this. I think the key question is going to be how big is the difference on dates when the maximum import bid price is actually used. Do you have any inclination to speculate on that, or have you done any retrospective analysis looking at days in the past when there's actually been use of the maximum import bid price in setting default bids, increasing the bid cap?
Thanks for the question.
Yep.
Yes, Alva, thanks for the question. Certainly, I think my response will be to direct you to the May 28th working group issue paper and analysis that was presented, which exactly answers your question. In that presentation, we cover how the two shaping factor and maximum import bid price formulations would have compared for a high price period. Specifically, we analyze the Martin Luther King Jr. Day period from January 2024. I would directly recommend to review the analysis that was presented there. We saw in that analysis that, especially as you arrive at the onset of those high price days, the behavior becomes very interesting. When the high price day, right at the onset of the high price day, the two values converge to be the same. However, before and after, we see differences between the two. and it depends on what the trending day-ahead SMEC values would have been in that period of time. Hopefully that answers your question, but I don't really want to dig that up too much, but we already did that analysis. And so
Yeah,
hopefully that will answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, of course, one would be interested in looking at summer type of, but you're sort of indicating that on the day when it's, you know, kind of most important, the onset of a heat wave, you're going to have good convergence between these two. You're not going to see too big of a difference. And then there may be differences, as you say, just because of the dates that are being selected, essentially may be different in the two cases. And I would assume from what you're showing here that in general, the new value is going to be higher than the old value in general.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
would agree.
Very helpful. Thank you.
To add,
Cool.
I also I went ahead and added that link to that May 28th workshop so folks can
Great,
see
thank you,
that,
Brenda.
what they're referencing. You're welcome. And we did have one more question for you, Mahir, from Jordan Miner from CPUC. He had two questions. So the first one was just the unit in the y-axis. Is it in dollars or dollars hundreds? I think it's
Yeah, I
the,
apologize for that. It is dollars per megawatt hour, definitely not hundreds. Maximum bid price has been relatively stable and has not come close to breaching the $1,000. So this is dollars per megawatt hour. Apologies for that.
great. And the next question was how many more market import bid price days we would have with the new implementation?
I'm sorry, I'm not really following the question. Can you ask it in a different way? How many days are remaining?
Let me ask if Jordan Miner could go ahead and go on mute because they're just asking how many more of the days, how many more MIBP days we have with the new implementation. So let me see if he can go ahead and unmute him to clarify. Ryan, if you could go ask, hopefully Jordan is available to chime in.
Sorry, give me 1 second. All right, Jordan, you're unmuted.
Hi, Jordan, mine is CPUC. I think you actually answered the question when Alva asked it similarly. So I just couldn't retract my question, so we're good. Thank you.
No problem.
No more questions in queue. Mahir, thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
So next we do have Leisha. She's our power systems forecaster specialist. Just want to make sure she's ready. I see you, Leisha. Let's do a quick audio check to see if your audio is coming in.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. Next slide, please. So just jumping in real quick for this one slide, we wanted to elaborate or communicate on an issue with our today's Outlook day-ahead renewable forecast. Today's Outlook displays a day-ahead demand forecast and day-ahead net demand forecast. So I'm showing those two views up the right here. And if you take the forecast data from the demand trend and then difference it with the net demand day-ahead forecast, that should total the day-ahead renewables forecast. The issue was that some hybrid megawatts were erroneously included in this day-ahead renewables forecast total. The day-ahead renewables should only represent the solar and wind resources and not hybrids with renewable components. The market notice actually included a little bit more information. So the impact was on the order of 40 to 500, I think 86 megawatts, and started as early as February 2023. The market notice concerning this issue was posted on December 10th, and the issue was fixed for trade date December 11th moving forward. this only affected the forecast information and not the actuals. And because it only impacted forecasts at this time, there is no backfill plan for that data. But the market notice has been issued and the configuration issue has been addressed. So the day ahead renewables forecast numbers should be correct now moving forward, only including CAISO solar and wind resources. I don't know if we can go through the rest of the market issue slides and then see if there's any questions, and I can pop back on.
No questions.
Hey, hi, this is, oh. Are you able to hear me, Jenny Araj?
Yes, go ahead, Jenny. Please introduce your title as well. Thank you.
Okay, Jenny Araj, Senior Advisor in the Market Validation Group. I'll go over a couple more market issues. This next one is actually a compliance issue where we are always looking at our tariff and ensuring we are complying with our tariff. And so this one relates to the pay for regulation performance function. And pay for performance for regulation is a performance threshold used to assess whether resources that are scheduled for regulation actually respond to our regulation set point signals. And our tariff in Section 8 says that we should apply this minimum performance threshold methodology to all intervals when a resource is scheduled for regulation during a calendar month. In 2022, we automated certain features for these regulation performance evaluations. And when we were doing that automation, they set the minimum performance threshold methodology to only 15 intervals of the month instead of all the intervals that a resource is scheduled during a calendar month. Next slide. So the market impact of this is minimal because we have a mileage payment settlement mechanism. So resources are actually paid for mileage based on how they really respond to set point signals. But we did perform an impact analysis for these 2 years and found that if we had the correct methodology in place to look at all intervals, we would have possibly sent 86 resources warning notices that they were in danger of losing their regulation certification, and then 17 would have actually been decertified. The ISO we didn't go back and perform any retroactive decertifications. We've corrected this process in 2024, and we've reported this issue to the FERC Office of Enforcement. Okay, next slide. Okay, another market issue relating to regulation. This one came from our System Operations Department. They frequently noticed that resources would come off the Automatic Generation Control, or AGC, 2 to 3 minutes before the end of the interval and then ramp to the next DOT, presumably trying to do that. Ramp to the next DOT. This greatly impacts reliability as we procure these regulation resources for the specific need to maintain ACE and frequency, and we need them for the full interval that they're awarded regulation. So you will see an upcoming PRR, or revision request, to the Market Operations BPM, that we're going to make it clear that a resource with the regulation award must stay on AGC through the end of the interval, and then it can ramp to its next DOT. Are there any questions on the market issues that we went over?
I do see Jenny Alva from PG&E has his hand raised. Let's go ahead and unmute him right in. Okay.
All right, Alva, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Just to confirm, there's no the regulation signals are still being received or are still being sent during that interval. So if you're on if you are on automated control, you'll just continue to regulate, and so this would represent some process at the resource that was taking it off of regulation early. Is that correct, or is there some issue here where it's possible CAISO could actually send an incorrect signal?
No, our client relations did reach out to a few of these people, a few resources, and they've programmed some kind of controller at the plant to just automatically do this. And so once we get the guidance out there and some training, we can, again, provide that guidance not to do that, to change your controllers at the plant.
Simply to respond, continue to respond to the regulation signals. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
There's no more questions, Jenny.
Thanks.
Guillermo, your audio. Go ahead and check. There you are.
Yeah,
There
thank you, Brenda. Let's move to this other topic that is about the load conformance. This has been a very recurrent topic that we have been discussing in different forums, including this one, because of the interested approach we are taking for ensuring that we can manage properly the system, provide the operators the tools that they need, and identify potential enhancements that need to take place in the market to minimize the root causes that is leading to the use of the load conformance. This is a very short version to what we have typically described because there are not many new events that we have to discuss. Let me start with this one. And there are two main trends that I would like to discuss. The first one is related to the day-ahead market, the residual unit commitment process, the RUC process. And you may recall we have had quite interesting dynamics and effects of the changes that we have done for guiding the need for the RUC adjustments. This picture tries to capture the essence of some changes that we have done over the last 2 years, starting from 2023 all the way through basically now. And there is a point in time description of the different events, the different actions and changes that we have implemented along the way. Typically, we're going to see that the RUC adjustments tend to be higher when we are in these tight supply conditions, high demand conditions. At some point, we implemented this pilot program, and that is the reason you see this blank, because we effectively didn't use any load conformance in the RUC process for some time to really assess how the market was behaving without the use of the load conformance and what was being lost or what uncertainty was created by not having that RUC adjustment. Then effectively in July 2023, we went ahead and implemented a more programmatic calculation for the RUC adjustments using similar logic to what we're going to be doing for the imbalance reserves in the day-ahead market enhancement. And that is when we start getting these sustained higher values for the RUC adjustments because it was based on the profile of the imbalance reserves all 24 hours of the day regardless. From that, we have gone through these lessons learned and have adjusted the protocol, the process, to ensure that it is not just the programmatic calculation that we do, but also there is an association to the conditions that we are facing to relate to whether we need that level of procurement or not. Since December 2023, when we start making adjustments, we have done at least 3 different incremental changes, and we have been transparent to those in previous MPPF discussions, to the point where we are currently at. If you look at for the last few months, if we focus the December timeframe, for instance, and typically, yes, we are going to have still reasonable levels of RUC adjustments for the summer conditions. And that is when we have the values on average of 2,500 megawatts for a couple of days in July, and then followed by late August and early September. And naturally, given the fact that this is triggered based on system conditions, that is going to subside as we pass the summer conditions. More recently, as you can see for late October, early November, the rock adjustments have been minimum. In some specific days, basically, there has been no adjustment given the conditions that we have in the system. Those conditions are based on supply, demand balancing in the CAISO area, the weather conditions that are not only in the CAISO area, but in the wider West system, and also the demand level, right? If we're dealing with demands that are in the range of over 40,000 megawatts, it's a different type of risk you are dealing with when you are facing demands of 26,000 megawatts. So all these are factors internalizing this triggering for the rock adjustments. And these are transparent. You can check the operating procedure that we have socialized before, where we have this matrix of information, how we arrive to the different levels of the rock adjustments. Since then, it has been relatively stable. We haven't made any additional changes, and we continue to assess how that has been working. To give you a different perspective of the rock adjustments, and Brenda, we can move to the next slide, please. This is the same information, but organized in an hourly profile. And this is by time of the year, because yes, it matters what time of the year you are dealing with for this topic. When we look at the summer conditions, that is within the Q3 of the year, we can see that these are the times when we observe the highest levels of rock adjustments for 2024. 2023 is in there as a reference, just to compare what it was before we had this improved, enhanced protocol for determining the level of adjustments. In Q4, that is somehow past summer, non-summer peaking conditions, you may see that the reference of 2023 led to these extremely high values, right? Because we were using the 97.5 percentile requirements all the time, regardless, even though we were past the summer conditions. With the adjusted process that we have, now we have 2 months of the same time frame, that is October and November for 2024. And you can see the significant difference of the adjustments that we have before and after the enhancements took place for the guidance of the rock adjustments. Even in the middle of the day, in 2023, we were asking the system for an additional 3,000 megawatts. Now, based on this adjusted protocol that we have, in many days, we don't even have any adjustments in the middle of the day, given the conditions that we have to be dealing with. And that is a good improvement. How do we measure that improvement? Well, one way to do it is through the cost. And we move to the next slide, Brenda. This is a metric that we have been tracking and reporting in relationship to the rock adjustment dynamic. By the time we impose additional adjustments to the rock process, the market is non-price responsive in that sense. It's going to try to procure as much rock adjustments as we ask, to the point that when there is no supply available, it may be infeasible and we have a rock infeasibility. One of the consequences is that we may be committing additional resources that are not fast start resources. The difference between fast start and not fast start is that even though the day-ahead market may commit those resources, they are not binding, because the real time can make the last decision to whether commit or not those resources. However, among the pool of resources that can be committed because of the rock adjustments, we do have those resources that can only be committed in the time frame of the day-ahead market. So the rock adjustments had led in these periods of summer 2023 to commitments that have to be honored in the real-time market, and once they are committed in the real-time market, given the conditions, may be sitting at the P-min and may run into some uneconomical adjustments. This metric is the bit cost recovery broken out by market, and once we start observing this relationship of high BCR, high rock adjustments, and we start making the adjustments necessary to still capture the operational need of the capacity that was needed, but be mindful of the conditions that have to be captured, and we start enhancing the process, you can see that this VCR cost for the rock process basically collapsed starting in January 2024, not only because of the change of the processes, but also because of the conditions that we are dealing with. We are in non-summer conditions. And since then, it has been relatively mild. Even for the last summer that we have in the time frame of July, August, and September, yes, it bumped a little bit in September, but it was still within a reasonable range. So this is a good reference to put in context how these rock adjustments play a role in the economics of the market overall. Before I move to the real time, I see a hand that is from Alva, Brenda, and Brian.
Sure. All right, Alva, you're unmuted.
Guillermo, this in the past, CAISO has drawn some analogy between this RUC adjustment and the uncertainty component that was going to be addressed by the imbalance reserves. Does this is there any implication that there might be similar volatility in the amount of imbalance reserves that's procured between critical seasons and non-critical seasons?
Yes, that's a very good question, Alban. And yes, there are implications. I would say that when we decided, based on the results of the summer 2022, to move towards a more programmatic calculation of the uncertainty, because let me step back. The whole motivation to have the ROC adjustments in the current market construct is as a tool to address the net load uncertainty, which happens to be the motivation to have to move forward with the day-ahead market enhancements and using the imbalance reserve. That is the connection, right? Under the current construct, we effectuate that through the ROC adjustments. Once we have the day-ahead market enhancement, that is going to be effectuated through the imbalance reserve. And that is a formal product with price-responsive conditions and so on. So I would say that the lessons we are learning now with this implementation under the current construct are going to be useful to set the pace of what potentially have to be in place for the day-ahead market enhancements. It's a different construct. It's price-driven. There is a price response curve there for imbalance reserve and the whole implication of having a product. But to your point, we do currently identify the need to have that type of assessment. And I think there will be a good time when we can bring this publicly and have an organized discussion how we are expecting to potentially incorporate this dynamic that we are seeing pre-DIM into the DIM. We are actively working internal within the CAISO to have our heads around this, and once we have the consolidation of what we believe could be a proper way to consolidate the process, we will have that socialization with the market at large. That is at some point due to come publicly.
That will be great. I think the thing that I've been, when I realized that the imbalance reserves were going to be part of the RSE test and therefore could lead to sometimes some extreme consequences, I was concerned with how these values were set. It's really good to hear that you're working on that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Do we have any other questions, Brenda, on the phone?
No questions at this time.
Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. This is just a short recap for the real time, and specifically this is for the HASP process. And we also track closely the load conformance for the real time. The dynamics, the motivations, the root causes are quite different. This is no more than position and ramping conditions for the real time. And similar to the day ahead, we have been tracking this, and in the past, we have elaborated about the 10 different root causes that we have identified, and we continue to work in addressing each of these causes. At least one of them is going to be discussed later when we cover the FRP performance. For the last few months, I would say that it's expected that in the summer conditions for 2024, we tend to see an increase of the use of the load conformance in the HASP market. Now, there is a point in time that happens to be in October. Specifically, that is October 8th. And you can see that seems to be out of the range for typical conditions past summer time frame. This is atypical. This is not just the standard load conformance that we apply. October 8th, if you go back in history and try to recall what happened on October, and specifically in the time frame of the 8th, we were dealing with an operational condition in the system. There was this pine fire that has an impact in the northern part of the system. So the HASP conformance that you see here that was higher than a typical summer day was precisely to manage and to hedge for that risk of the fire impacting different supplies coming to the CAISO and the supply in general in the Northwest. So I would say out of that event, the typical profile that we have for load conformance is what we are focused on. There will be days where we have system events like the day of October 8th, where this is a good tool to use to hedge for that type of risk. And I think that's the last slide for this topic of load conformance. So with that, well, let me see if there are any questions quickly for this topic in general before we move forward. I don't see any hands, Brenda. So let's move on with the FRP.
Okay.
Hi, this is Quinn. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
That's good. Okay, Quinn, lead analyst in market analysis. I'm going to cover the first few slides of FRP and switch it to Amber's team and pick it up back later on. This is a quick update of the FlexRamp performance. We start with looking at the FRU requirement for CAISO area. This is the monthly trend of FlexRamp up requirement. And starting from January 2022 through November 2024, it's a longer period of time. In the recent months, we say that the trend remains stable and the numbers remain in the typical ranges. Next slide, please. Similarly, we look at the FlexRamp down requirements for the CAISO area over the same period of time. This is monthly trends as well. And for the downside, the recent months trend has been stable as well. Next slide, please. Here is a daily distribution of the FlexRamp up requirement in the last 3 months. Again, for the CAISO, you can see the color coded for the different months, and the daily distributions have been remaining in the similar ranges over the past 3 months. Next slide, please. We do the same for the downside, and this is a daily distribution of the FRD requirement in the last 3 months for CAISO area as well, and the trend has been stable in the past 3 months. And next slide, please. Okay, this is an hourly profile of the upward FRU trend. And we see that the requirement for CAISO has been, well, it's been a trend that the requirements are picking up in the peak hours during the morning and evening peaks. Next slide, please. And this is the hourly profile for the FRD trend. It has a complementary pattern to the FRU trend we just saw earlier. And we see that the higher values show up in the midday hours. Next slide, please. Okay, from here, I'm handling it to the Lisha.
All right, thanks, Glenn. Right, so this is, from the forecasting perspective, a review of how the FRP requirement has performed over the past year, but also really focusing on the two enhancements put in 2024. The first one was implemented on April 4th. It involved the removal of our day type definition, so weekend versus weekday. And then there was a VER capacity correction adjustment as well. Those two changes went in together. And then a second enhancement went in August, which addressed the sampling scheme. We previously used a rolling sample scheme, so looking at the past 180 days from the trade date versus symmetric, which now looks at the past 90 days as well as 1 year prior and 90 days forward, so that the trade date is more centered in the historic sample. So I will present on some results from performance focusing on those enhancements. We also wanted to mention that there is a new training available for entities to review. We provided a reference on FRP threshold calculations. It is posted in our training center under market and operations topic, related materials, and there's also a direct link in the slides here. The reference there, that training deck, points to the data available in OASIS that can be used to recreate the calculation used to determine static threshold requirements. There's also information there about our dynamic thresholds and how those thresholds are applied to the FRP requirement. And basically by looking at this data that goes into the threshold calculations, it is also a way to review the components of FRP and review whether solar demand, wind, how those components are driving FRP requirements and performance overall. So hopefully this training can help entities review if they're interested in seeing what is driving net demand uncertainty. Okay, I'll actually pause there. I see we have a hand raised.
Yeah, so we do have a raised hand from Chanyu. Chanyu, you are now unmuted.
Yeah, good morning. This is Chanyu from PG&E. Yeah, thank you for this information. Just I'm just curious whether this FRP requirements going through the implementation process or it's just a production quick fix, but sounds like there are enhancements.
These changes did go into production. We've called them enhancements where they're within, I think, the configurable settings, but they're, oh, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. So these were enhancements, and yeah, they have already been implemented in production.
Right. Okay. So it just want to make sure it did not go through the PMO going through the implementation process, right? Just
Right,
want to
it
make
did not
sure I don't miss
require-
anything.
Right. It did
Oh.
not require like system enhancements. This is just the sort of calculation settings that are seen to help with performance improvements.
I see. Thank you. Thanks for the providing the clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Okay, we can go to the next slides. Okay, so we provide our normal reporting of coverage requirement and exceedance sort of in the following slides. We just wanted to provide a couple performance updates focusing on those enhancements that went in. Again, just changes to the calculation of FRP. So the day type removal was simulated, we showed in simulations that weekend performance was flagging a bit, and we didn't need the weekend day type definition as much anymore because with more solar and wind on the system, the difference in the demand was less important to the calculation of FRP. The graphs here at the top show coverage of weekdays versus weekends, and then using a sample period from 2023 versus the same sample period in 2024. The bottom plot shows requirements for FRU and FRD, basically showing that this 4.4 enhancement improved weekend coverage without detriment to weekday performance. And then looking at requirements, we do see that the FRU requirement, the range generally increased compared to 2023. FRD decreased, the median decreased a little bit, the range is a bit larger. And as far as requirements go, we generally expect there's going to be some increase in requirements year on year with our capacity growth. So yeah, just wanted to note that there. And we can go to the next slide. So this is now pulling a sample of August 2023 forward to December 2023 and that same period in 2024. The upper plot again shows coverage, the lower plot shows requirements, and now this one's just the FRD versus FRU. I may double check this coverage plot. I'm not sure if FRU should be on the left and FRD is on the right. I will just double check that. Okay, but in aggregate, we've seen that coverage in 2024 has remained comparable. Upward requirements have increased slightly in the requirement plot. Downward requirements have decreased slightly. The symmetric sampling should really assist with performance of the transition season. So we are pulling this very shortened season from the second half of the year. And there's other factors involved here, like different weather patterns in the shorter sample and difference in the VER growth between sample seasons that would affect these requirements going up or coverage going down or not seeing the same increase as simulated. But in general, we saw basically comparable performance on coverage with the 814 enhancement, and then some changes in requirements that look similar to the 4.4 overall changes as well. And next slide. I won't spend too much time discussing these, but we summarize the monthly coverage by CAISO and by EIM area for FRU and FRD. Next slide. This is the requirements now in FRU and FRD. And then next slide. Exceedance. So in the case where net demand uncertainty did exceed the FRP requirement, what was the average megawatts of that exceedance? And that is the end of the FRP topic. So I will pause there for questions.
Hi, Alicia. I don't see any questions, but I did submit in the chat for those who are following the link that was shown previously on the document for the quarterly FRP threshold slide deck. And also, if anyone has any questions, they could also submit via City Ticket for short-term forecasting with the category forecast. So that way you can always get a better question from the team via City. But I don't see any more questions for your team at this time.
Great, thank you.
All right, this is Quinn again. I'm picking up the slides from here. So now we're looking at the procurement side. This is the FRU procurement for the passing group. breakdown by region, and this is daily, hourly break trend. So it's daily, hourly interval trend. So this is a 15-minute data points stacking up. And the region breakdown, we're looking at California, Central Mountain, Pacific Northwest, and Southwest. And we see from the graph that majority of the FRU procurement is currently from California and Pacific Northwest. Next slide, please. This is a zoomed in hourly distribution of FRU procurement. And we see that CAISO area has been showing up for almost all hours of the day, and especially in the peak hours. It used to show up just in the peak hours, now it's almost all hours of the day. And Pacific Northwest too is flying all hours of the day. Next slide, please. This is a different breakdown with the same data. So this is FRU procurement by resource types. We have several resource types listed down below, and the main categories are generic NGRs in gray, LESRs batteries in blue, that's a big one. We see some solars, infinite months, and then water in dark blue. Next slide, please. Same data, this is the zoomed in version hourly distribution of the FRU procurement breakdown for the passing group for the recent 6 months, June through November. And we see that procurement largely from battery resources in light blue, generic NGR in gray, and then water in dark blue. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the note we wanted to insert here. The current formulation of state of charge does not include the impact of FRU in the trajectory. Since we see that a large share of FRP procurement is from storage resources, we say that it may not provide the material ramp to the real-time market as we hope to. So through the analysis of FRP performance, the ISO has identified the need to enhance the logic to account for state of charge, well, to account for FRP procurement in the state of charge formulation. And this topic is included in the upcoming energy storage enhancement initiative. So definitely stay tuned in that one if you're interested. Next slide, please. This is the frequency of intervals of non-zero FMM prices for the passing group. We see that the passing group level prices have been remaining low after the nodal implementation, and we don't see significant percentages showing up on this chart. And note that we do have nodal prices after the nodal enhancement. This is on the passing group level. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the non-zero, well, frequency of intervals with non-zero FRD price, RTD prices. And same thing, the percentages have remained low. If you look at the y-axis, the top one is 0.5%. So all the price signals remain low. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the end of FRP section. Are there any questions before we move on to energy storage?
Hi, Quinn. We do have 2 raised hands, starting with Alva, PG&E. Please go ahead. Ryan, go ahead and mute Alva. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Appreciate it. Could you go, I don't know if we need to go back to the slides, but the slides on storage's contribution to FRP. Before you put your note up, I was going to draw a very different conclusion from the slide, which is that the FRP is being contributed disproportionately by batteries, and therefore you would want to be concerned about how is there a mismatch between the plan to really constrain the procurement of imbalanced reserve up day ahead, because it may be that you're essentially not paying batteries for what they're actually able to provide in real time. Now, when you got to your actual comments, I had a question about why you would think, I mean, it seems to me FRP should be almost interchangeable with energy. You should be looking at exactly the same constraints there. Is it anecdotal, or have you seen a systematic case of FRP, flexible ramping up, not being deliverable due to state of charge constraints?
So thank you for the question, first of all. We did see a trend switch. We used to, before September last year, we used to see a lot of procurement, well, majority of the resource types from FRU procurement types from generic NGRs, and water and battery as the third highest category, I would say.
Okay.
And starting from September 2023, there was a trend change. This timing aligned with the normogram activation.
Right.
It also is impacted by other factors like storage, more storage participation, and the bidding behavior and market solution in general. So we do see this trend change, and there are different perspectives we're considering in this topic. One is the pricing signal. Yes, this is one of the topics remain in the discussion, and how we can have the right price signal in FRP, so that when the resources get awards, they get correctly compensated, right? That's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is always, when we have this procurement, is that really deliverable? And is there anything that's preventing the deliverability? And in this case, the state of charge, well, the FRU impacting state of charge is a known issue. From our cases, we did see some cases that state of charge limitation is there, and it's a broader topic of state of charge management in storage community, right? So FRP is one of the subtopics under that umbrella.
Right, but I mean, it's like flexible ramping, you're only procuring looking forward, within essentially an hour. So it shouldn't be that frequent that you would, essentially, what you're saying is that if I buy flexible ramping from this battery, it's not deliverable. Whereas if I buy energy, it is deliverable. Is kind of the way I would see the trade-off. And it just seems like you should only see that when you're pretty close to the constraints already, which shouldn't happen, necessarily all that often. So I'm just was curious, and I look forward to. I don't want to. I mean, you're promising an analysis, and that's great, and also bringing it into the storage initiative. So I appreciate that, and I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely we'll include more discussions in the storage initiative.
Thank you.
Great. Next we have Kelly. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Kelly Haraguchi, Bonneville Power. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I think in their last quarterly call, DMM mentioned maybe an unintended implementation of the settlement calculation for the forecasted movement related to FRP. And I was hoping you could refresh my memory on whether or not that a fix to that has been implemented or not.
Sorry, I don't have this information with me. We probably need to follow up offline.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Oh, no, Quinn, there's no more questions. Let me make sure. Nope, no questions. Thank you. Let's go ahead. Energy storage performance, is that still for you, Quinn?
Yes, that's so me.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. All right, so switching gears, this is energy storage enhancement update. As a quick reminder, this ESE last phase enhancement went live. Let me see. Track 1 was July 2023. Track 2 was November 2023. So that went live last year. The main focus was to incorporate regulation in state of charge management, and we talk about efficiency and reliability in storage participation in that phase, right? And shown here is the high-level overview of the attenuation factor changes. Old versus new constraints for state of charge. So we have these two sets of state of charge constraints. One is for energy only, one is with regulation of words embedded in the trajectory. So this proposal eliminates the direct coupling of energy and AS from the previous proposal, while still manage the feasibility of regulation of words. And the variables highlighted in blue are the multipliers defining the expected utilization of regulation of words, or in other words, the anticipated impact of regulation on the real-time state of charge. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the proportion of storage resources in regulation up requirements within the day-ahead market, the ISM share. The x-axis gives the months January 2023 through November 2024, and the y-axis gives the percentages. The percentage share is defined as the total market words from LESR resource type divided by total market requirements for that commodity. So we also have the reg up requirement, average reg up requirement for the month showing up there as a reference in green. So storage resources consistently hold a substantial share in regulation up requirement. You see that the medians of reg up will in the distribution are close to 100% for all months. We don't see a substantial changes in the recent months. Next slide, please. Same thing, this is the proportion of storage resources in regulation down requirements within the ISM market. The boxes are the distributions of the percentage shares. The green line is, again, the average of regulation down requirements for the month. And you see that we see a steady trend in the recent months. It's slightly increasing due to more participation of the storage resource in general. Next slide, please. So zooming in, this is hourly profile of the same information for the most recent 6 months. We don't see a significant change in general for the recent months. There's no significant changes in implementation as well. So that is this is the reg up, and ESR share of the reg up requirements, right? So we see that midday hours, there are more percentages showing up during the summer, coming down when it comes into November. We're going into winter period. So all the medians are close to 100% as of now. Next slide, please. This is the same thing. This is the hourly profile of the reg down side. And we have been seeing this shape for the past 6 months, and there is no significant change in the shape. Again, coming into winter, there's a little bit of scale shift, but it's similar shape on the hourly profile. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're looking at the monthly average of AS awards by resource composition, and this is ISM data. So the y-axis is AS awards in megawatt, x-axis gives the month ranging from January 2023 to November 2024. We have the 4 major resource types stacking up in the bar. Gas in dark blue, water in gray, then batteries in light blue. We see that batteries are taking significant shares in regulation up and down awards. We do see that batteries are also starting to pick up spin and non-spin in the recent months. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the same data in a different format. This is the monthly distribution of the AS awards in ISM market. We don't see a significant change in pattern for regulation up and down. And again, we started to see that batteries are picking up spin and non-spin in the recent months. Next slide, please. Same data, zooming in an hourly profile. This is reg up awards for batteries and RU awards in megawatt in the y-axis in the hourly profile. Next slide, please. Similarly, we look at reg down awards in the day-ahead market for the 6-month period. And in our hourly profile, we don't see significant changes in the recent trend. Next slide, please. Okay, this one is the relative size of regulation awards, regulation up awards on the resource level over the 2-year period, January 2023 to November 2024. So these are the battery resource level share of the reg up requirement. And we do have the reg up requirement average showing up in green, showing there as a reference. The percentages stay within typical ranges in the recent months. Next slide, please. Similarly, we look at reg down awards as a percentage. Well, resource level reg down awards as a percentage of reg down requirement in a similar fashion. And we do have reg down requirement average showing up there as well in green for reference. We don't really see a significant change in trend in the recent months as well. Next slide, please. As a sanity check, we also look at the resource level regulation prices. This is the day-ahead ISM price in dollars on the y-axis, and we look at these are all the resources receiving regulation up or downwards for the 3-month period from September to end of November 2024. That's the update period of this new MTPS. So as a sanity check, again, we don't see negative regulation prices in the recent months in the day-ahead market. Next slide, please. Similarly, we look at FMM regulation prices at resource level. Again, it's all the resources, all the resource types, right? All the resources receiving regulation up or downwards in the RTPD market, and all the resource level prices have been non-negative. Next slide, please. Okay, switching gears. Let me pause here. Is there any questions before? Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a question, Quinn. Kelly Wells, let's go ahead and unmute her. I think she might have a question on slide 75, but let's double check.
Callie, you're unmuted.
Hi, it's Callie Wells with WPTF. I had a more general question, I think, with all of your regulation metrics. And first of all, thank you guys for putting that analysis together. It's really helpful. So I think the high level takeaway is since those changes went into place with the SOC taking into account regulation awards, there really hasn't been that big of a change in the trends that you guys are showing. And obviously that change that went into place was really trying to address an issue where resources were being awarded regulation in the day ahead, and then come real time, their SOC wasn't at a place where they can continue to support those awards. But if we're not seeing a change in the amount of regulation that storage resources are being awarded, are we still seeing that issue in real time, or is it maybe that the awards are now spread out over more storage resources so that when we're looking at these aggregated trends, we're not seeing a change, but maybe at a more granular level, we are seeing a change in how the market's awarding regulations so that that issue in real time has been addressed? I'm just trying to see if the solution that was implemented addressed the issue or if we're still seeing the issue.
Thank you for the question. So there were two phases, right? That was last year. Track one, we did see more significant impact from track one activation. That was July because we had the 50% coverage factor putting in, and track two, November, attenuation factors, we did not see very significant impact since November 2023. We do see that more, well, one aspect of it is that we do have more and more storage resources participating in the market, and these are more resources as a whole from the system level, right, as I said. So we do have more resource distribution as well from, I think we showed that in some of the previous presentations. Those are not included in the standard deck right now. So if we go back to those, we probably see some of the more detailed analysis over there.
Okay, I appreciate that. Did you guys, and I'm sure you guys showed this data and it's just escaping me at the moment, did you see a shift in the trends with the July implementation that restricted the awards?
Yes, the July one was more obvious.
Okay.
That was a significant, yeah, that was a fairly significant trend change showing up. And over the months, as more and more resources join in the market, that gap has been closer and closer to, so that gap has been filled with more and more resources joining the market.
Okay, no, that's really helpful because I know during that policy discussion, one of the questions raised was, do we need both of the changes, or does, you know, that first change, the July implementation, would that address the majority of the issue? But it sounds like maybe it's a combination of the two, and the market's now awarding regulation across more storage resources. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Quinn. No more questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brenda. So let me switch topic a little bit. This is about the attenuation factors in particular. As part of the track 2 enhancement, we introduced this term attenuation factors for regulation awards in the state charge formulation. So these are values calculated for each hour and direction. It's applied in the day ahead and real-time marketing models. These values are derived to the estimation of the actual regulation usage using historical data, each hour and direction, considering also seasonality, quarter. We have a quarterly review and update of the values. The values will be posted to the CAISO website 1 month prior to the next quarter. So when we say that when a resource is providing either regulation up or down, we will respond. It will respond to a 4-second AGC signal. The delta between AGC set point and dispatch operating point is the utilized megawatt. So we compare the usage of regulation alerts to get the proportion. Then these values are calculated as the weighted average on the system level. This is to smooth out outliers. So we get these hourly values per quarter. Next slide, please. So here we're looking at the actual utilization of regulation up for Q4 2024, first 2 months of Q4, so October and November, comparing that to the attenuation factors on the regulation up we used for this quarter that was generated from 2023 data, right? So we see that the chart on the top has the averages. The blue bar has the actual utilization of RU in blue, and then the dashed black line is the attenuation factors that we used for this quarter. We see that the shapes are similarly aligned, and the actual utilization of regulation up in the midday hours are slightly higher in average than the attenuation factors, but the shapes are similar, and regulation upside, the percentages remain low, below 15% for most of the hours. And the chart below has the hourly distribution, similarly compared to the attenuation factor on the regulation upside. We do see the shape and the outages as well, the outliers as well, sorry. Next slide, please. We look at the same charts for the regulation downside. This is probably a little more interesting to look at because regulation downside, we have higher values. These values range from 30%, around 30% and up. For this quarter, we look at on the averages, comparing the actual utilization regulation down to the attenuation factors we used. For RNA 18 and 19, the attenuation factors are slightly higher than the actual utilization currently for this month. We do expect to see the deviations because, again, these values are generated from historical data, right? And looking at the chart at the bottom, if we compare the attenuation factor with the distribution, we do see that the attenuation factor values are still within the trend in the boxes. Still within the trend. Next slide, please. Okay, from here on, we have the standard metrics. We show the megawatt hours state of charge and the megawatts in energy awards, and also average ancillary services for storage resources in the 6 month period, June 2024 to November 2024. I'm not going to go through these in details. So if there's any questions, we can answer those questions.
Yes, it looks like we do have one raised hand from Alva. Alva, you're unmuted.
Hey, Kun, just one possible request on the attenuation factors would be if you can also do sort of a distribution, like looking at the distribution by resource in terms of how much variability there is in the attenuation, the actual sort of use. I'm curious as to whether there are some locational elements to this, or whether it's pretty uniform, both reg up and reg down, whether the attenuation factors are, sort of showing a good average for all the batteries, or whether there are outliers by battery, not so much by day.
Okay, thank you for the request. Yes, we are discussing different metrics, how to show the distributions and variability. Since these are calculated as quarterly averages, these are on the resource level. I'm sure there's a lot more variations and variability showing up, so we can look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think I see any more questions raised. Ryan, do you have any in the phone line?
No, I do not see any.
Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, Quinn, go ahead.
Sounds good. I think that's the end of my section. I'll hand it over to Abhishek.
This is Abhishek here from market analysis. So we can skip the gas and the power index prices and the market costs, and probably we can stop here and we can ask any questions if anyone has any questions, or any other questions if anyone has it. We'll be able to answer that if possible.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, I'm seeing no questions, but anyone has any questions for the topics discussed in Guillermo's and the short-term forecasting team, we can also address those as well. I did send maybe one question to the team through chat, but if there's anything that is missing, we could definitely follow up. But I will be going ahead and updating the slide deck in a moment to take a quick break. If Ryan, can you go ahead and let me become presenter for 1 second? We'll update these slides before we get started for the next section. But in the meantime, we'll be also taking questions for audience if there's any. Just use the raise hand icon on your chat window. Let's see. Okay. So I just want to do a quick audio check with, we have Becky Robinson to make sure she's there. And then I think that's it. So Becky, I think you're still on mute, but we want to make sure your audio is coming through whenever you're ready. We'll get those slides ready for you as well.
Hi, Brenda, this is Becky. Sorry, was your comments just then directed at me?
Yeah, we're just checking your audio to make
Okay.
sure.
Yes, how am I
Yeah,
coming through?
it sounds great. I'm going to go to, if Ryan, can you go ahead and go to slide 125 for me? That'll be perfect.
Sure, not a problem.
Yeah, thanks everyone for who's in the audience with us. We are moving along. So we did submit some chats with some links relevant to what we have talked in the previous team. We also have another helpful link that was posted last month for the ISO glossary. We do use a lot of acronyms within the organization, so you'll find a lot of those acronyms listed on the glossary with a definition. So if you ever aren't wondering what the name that we're listing on our slides, we will have that listed on that glossary under the BPM. So we can go ahead and go to 125, and then we should be getting started. It's not letting me on my.
Okay, here, let me promote myself again.
Okay, sounds great. All right, Becky. You're ready.
Thank you,
Please introduce
Brenda.
yourself. Yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Becky Robinson, the Director of Market Policy Development, and happy to be here with you today to give just a brief update on our policy initiatives that we have going on. Next slide, please. All right, great, thank you. So first up, here just a brief update on our extended day-ahead market and day-ahead market enhancements item, which the policy has really been, in place for a while. That EDAM tariff is fully approved, and we are currently engaging in implementation activities. And one of those in particular to note relates to our day-ahead market enhancements implementation working groups. And so the past several months, in July, we had an initial meeting to kind of outline the testing timeline for getting the new imbalance reserve product in place, new reliability capacity product, all those day-ahead market enhancements. So we had that meeting in July to kind of set expectations and sort of have that initial point of contact in terms of what those implementation working groups would look like. As it relates to, in particular, thinking about those tunable parameters that were part of the policy design, and really working through some simulation and testing to evaluate initial values for those. We actually had a follow-up meeting on that just yesterday. My colleague Guillermo Bautista Arrete led that, and was a good opportunity to see some of the responses to feedback that we're proposing to make. In response to that initial meeting, stakeholders had kind of asked for maybe more engagement and earlier on than we initially proposed. And so we responded to that by moving up the timeline, adding in some additional meetings, so that there'll be a kickoff meeting in August of 2025. And then following that with monthly working group sessions beginning in October, which will coincide with the market simulation launch. And if we could go to the next slide. Great. Here you see an updated timeline from what we had shared before, where you see where we are today in December of 2024 on this graphic. And then you see that the day-ahead market enhancements configurable parameters tuning line item there with stakeholder meetings starting in the second half of next year, but with a good period of engagement there.
Becky, we do have a question just before you move on to the next topic.
Sure.
Let's go ahead and mute Adora.
Sure, not a problem. Adora, you're unmuted.
Hi, yes. I think you've answered my question. In the slides that were posted for this event, I think it was still showing the outdated slide where Market Sim starts in June. On the configurable parameters call yesterday, they mentioned the new Market Sim start is September, and I see that on this slide here, which is not consistent with the deck that was posted previously. But just want to confirm that Market Sim is now starting in September, not June as previously scheduled.
Yes, I think that's correct. This is the more updated version of the slide. Apologies, there was a mix-up with having the older version in the slide deck that was published. I think, Brenda, we can update that deck after the call today so that it has the latest information, which is what's represented here.
Awesome, thank you.
Of course. All right. Next slide, please.
Well, it looks like we do have another raised hand from Jonathan. Jonathan, you're unmuted.
Hi, I imagine you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a reason for the compressed Market Sim timeline? Because the ending is still the same, but the starting point is now a couple months later.
I don't know if my colleague Guillermo is still on, if he would like to address that. I mean, my point of emphasis in this slide is that we are, we are expanding the amount of time for the day-ahead market enhancements kind of configurable parameters discussion. So that is starting earlier than it was before. As to sort of market simulation, more generally, I'm not the best person to ask about that. Do we
Okay.
still have Guillermo on? He may have dropped off.
Yeah, he made it dropped off, but I did Skype him right now to make sure if he's able to come in. But yeah, we could always take that. Mahir, I think Mahir is also part of his team. Maybe he may know, or Jenny or Quinn is still with us right now.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because it is a now much more compressed time frame for market sim and some fairly significant changes. We absolutely appreciate, being involved earlier in the process. Just hoping that there's a sufficient time now that it's been compressed. Thank you.
Okay, and we can follow up on that as well if we don't have a response now.
And looks like we do have a chat question that just came in from Moan. Question is the parallel operation same as the go live?
No, the parallel operations precedes go live. Go live, I believe, is happening in April or May. Again, I'm probably not the best person to answer this, but it is not February, where we have parallel operations shown here.
All right, Becky, that's all the questions we have at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brenda. All right, next slide, please. All right, next up for our policy initiatives is our resource efficiency enhancement evaluation. Sorry, resource efficiency evaluation enhancements. This is an effort that we have been previewing as coming soon for a while. We had planned to kick it off this month, but as we are kind of getting all our ducks in a row internally, we've pushed that off to January. I know I've gotten a couple of reach outs from folks kind of making sure that wanting to make sure they didn't miss it, and you haven't missed it. So stay tuned. We will be getting a date on the calendar, hopefully in January. And that initiative will be focused on the assistance energy transfer functionality, which as of now has a sunset date in December of 2025. I know that's been a feature and a product that folks find value in, and so we want to, have that discussion about whether to simply extend that as it exists, and talk through, if there's talk through how to if there are other, elements that folks would like to see in that product as we extend that functionality past that current expiration date. Also in that initiative, we'll be thinking about and some improvements to increase the usability of the resource efficiency evaluation, thinking about sort of the de minimis threshold for determining whether or not folks pass the test and the implications of that. We will have some analysis from our, from my colleague Guillermo's team to sort of jumpstart that conversation and lay a good foundation for, assessing how it's been working in recent summer and winter, periods of tight system conditions when that test would be more relevant. So again, stay tuned for that, and that should be kicking off in January of next year. Any questions on this item before we go to the next?
No more questions.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Becky, someone just raised his hand after I said that. John Deep, I believe. Let's go ahead and introduce him for his quick question.
All right, John, you're unmuted.
Sorry, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I was double muted. So this is John Diff from Southern California Edison. So along the lines of RSEE, I wanted to see where we're at with basically the daily sufficiency initiative. The last meeting that we had was in May 13, and then it kind of dropped off the radar. So I'm just wondering when we're going to start that up again.
Yes, that's a great question. So the Day Ahead Sufficiency Initiative, yes. So I think we had published a straw proposal there, had a stakeholder call, probably a series of conversations, and we have been working internally on kind of next steps on that. So it has not gone away, and thanks for raising it. It's that's another one where I think there should be a meeting coming in January, and some materials before then as well, to inform that conversation. But yeah, it has sort of it's been a bit of time since the last meeting. Apologies for that. As we've been working through, lots of questions around EDAM implementation and getting further down the road of that, just wanting to sync all of that up in terms of how we're thinking about day ahead sufficiency for the BA, as well as tools that will be available, to all EDAM BAs, making sure that is equitable and sort of even across the board, and thinking about implementation plans for all of that. So that's probably more than you were looking for there, but I would say, that is, I would say there should be materials coming and a stakeholder meeting in January for that. Thanks for the question.
Great, thank you.
All right, next slide, please.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, next up, price formation enhancements. We have officially moved into phase 2, or policy development, on as of early November, and this stakeholder initiative is off to a running start. So we had a series of working groups earlier in the year, in phase 1, where we had extensive discussions and stakeholder feedback on 3 big topics: scarcity pricing, BAA level market power mitigation, and fast start pricing. As you may know, those efforts we took some time to work through the bidding above $1,000 for storage and hydro resources in particular, coming out of that effort. But really this fall, moving back into those 3 big topics that we had teed up in working groups before. And so we are having about weekly meetings on these topics. For those of you who haven't tuned in yet and might like to do so, there's a lot going on, a lot of really good conversations and topics. The current plan is that we are working towards straw proposals, kind of for two separate buckets of issues. The first is we're kind of pairing scarcity pricing with BAA level market power mitigation. And then we're also addressing fast start pricing, working these issues in parallel, and hoping to work towards seeing separate straw proposals on those by the May timeframe of 2025. And again, just to highlight, those working groups have really already are getting into substantive discussions on potential frameworks and implementation methods for fast start pricing, as well as market power mitigation. And the scarcity pricing discussion is kicking off next week. So if you haven't tuned in yet to those and are interested, please do so. We are looking for active stakeholder engagement as we kind of work through developing policy in order to get to that sort of initial straw proposal deliverable. All right, any questions on that one before we go to the next?
No questions, but I'll give a second. There we got Alva, PG&E, go ahead.
All right, Alva, you're unmuted.
Hello, Becky. Thank you so much for going through this. One question I have is on are any of these potentially being scoped as being pre-EDAM rollout, or has there been some care taken to ensure that these do not impact the EDAM implementation schedule?
Mm-hmm. I believe that these are not right. These are, you know, in as much as these are market evolutions that very much have kind of EDAM in mind, they're not something that we're looking to put in place for EDAM day one, right? So when we talk about wanting to have, you know, proposals to consider by May of next year, it's not that we're trying to get to something final, something that we can implement, you know, prior to spring of 2026. It's more just wanting to show, you know, concrete progress, and that we're, you know, moving through these issues deliberately and trying to make good use of the time that we're asking for stakeholders from. But no, not aiming to have these implemented by EDAM day one.
Great, that's great. I'm just a little bit concerned with the fact that the schedule is slipping now. If any of these were considered as minor fixes or urgent fixes, and then they did actually become part of the EDAM implementation, that could lead to further delays. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, we're very mindful of that as well, and not wanting certainly not wanting to compromise EDAM implementation and getting that up and running on day one. Thanks, Alva.
Thank you, Becky.
All right, if there are not any more questions there, we can go to the next slide. All right, greenhouse gas coordination. So the big focus of this working group, and something that we're sort of expecting to issue very soon, is some materials working through GHG accounting and reporting for folks who need to comply with state policies and other goals as well, where there are GHG reduction requirements, but which are requirements, but are not a price on carbon and are not a cap and trade system. So Oregon and New Mexico are examples of states that have these kind of requirements. There may be corporate goals that look similar to these. And so we've been, working with the working group to think about an accounting and reporting approach that would be a source of information from the ISO, again, to help these entities demonstrate compliance and progress towards meeting these goals of reducing their GHG emissions associated with power needed to serve their load. And which is really kind of getting into, yes, I own resources and sorry, not I, but thinking about companies that own and have contracted for resources to serve their load, but where they may be long or short in the market in any given 5-minute interval, and thinking about what's the implications of the energy I buy or sell from the market, net of what I own and contracted for, in terms of my emissions, right? What's the right emissions rate to use there? Can we do something that's a little more attuned to the resources that are actually operating in that given 5-minute interval or that given hour? And so expect some materials on that in the coming couple of weeks. And I think there'll be a stakeholder meeting coming up to discuss that as well. I think that'll be an issue to iterate on with stakeholders, but looking to kind of move that issue forward in terms of articulating an approach that may be helpful there. Also in that working group, continuing conversations on GHG metrics that would be helpful, in addition to the average GHG emissions rates that we are now publishing monthly and annually, or we've got annual reports as well as now monthly reports coming out with those in terms of average emissions rate from the system as a whole. And then also that working group continues to review the GHG design in the energy imbalance market and in the EDAM tariff. Any questions on GHG coordination before we go to the next item?
I don't see any questions at this time. But yeah, I think you're good, Becky. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. All right, so next up, we have our gas resource management working groups. And this is one where we are Working on finalizing an issue paper, hopefully to publish this later this month, where you'll see a lot more of the background and context and thinking around the problem statements and potential solutions that this working group has identified, related to increasing certainty as it relates to advanced fuel procurement, especially in thinking about the day-ahead time frame, day-ahead market, and the next day gas markets. The precision of gas market inputs that are used in terms of what we assume for reference levels and so forth in terms of resource participations in the markets, and then facilitating resource specific cost adjustments where those are needed. And so again, we had a discussion paper that came out in May of this year. We've been taking some time to really get into the meat and substance of these issues and prior work that's been done in this area, a few years ago, that we have wanted to update and kind of, dust off and make relevant for the broader regional market as we're looking at it today. So again, expect an issue paper on that hopefully this month. And stakeholder conversations to resume on that soon in the new year. All right, any questions on gas resource management?
No questions.
All right, thank you, Brenda. We can go to the next slide then. All right, so storage, bid cost recovery, and default energy bid enhancements. So as you likely know, we recently, just right before Thanksgiving, filed a tariff amendment with FERC to modify the real-time bid cost recovery rules for storage resources, which was a result of a stakeholder initiative that had been going on for several months before then. I appreciate all the engagement from you all that we had there. But the storage work will be continuing, and actually the next phase of the storage work kicked off earlier this week. And so we will be continuing to think about some of the issues that have been raised in that initial storage conversation, but where we didn't solve everything, as well as thinking more broadly about storage modeling issues. And so a lot of topics kind of being bucketed in that new initiative. We, if you didn't already see, check out the materials from that meeting in terms of how we're proposing to move forward on a number of issues there. And we are really looking for feedback as to getting folks involved in terms of presenting perspectives, as well as just how we're bucketing those issues and if that makes sense and seems like the right thing in terms of stakeholders' perspectives there. Any questions on storage?
Not seeing any questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Brenda. We could go to the next slide then. Okay, congestion revenue rights. We kicked off a congestion revenue rights initiative in November, and we'll be continuing that in the new year. And this effort really kind of builds off some efforts a few years ago in 2019, the 2019 reforms to enhance the congestion revenue rights market. And we got a number of incoming ideas through the policy catalog process this year related to CRRs. And we are, in response to that, we said we did want to follow up on those 2019 reforms, commitments we had made to monitor that. And with all the ideas coming in through the policy catalog, it seemed like a good time to kick off an initiative. And so we issued a brief white paper kind of with some history and background about CRRs there, and we'll be having a series of working groups again in the new year to kind of get that topic going, and get into a number of the issues and problem statements raised there. And we've got some of those problem statements here on the page, related to auction efficiency, revenue inadequacy, the global D-rate factor and how that affects allocation and hedge value of CRRs, and product definition as it relates to counterflow, CRR allocation process, as well as the definitions and buckets we have for on and off peak CRRs, perhaps raising questions about the hedging value of the products that you can buy, thinking, for instance, about daytime on the weekends and solar resources. But so I would, consider this an advertisement for that effort if you've not already been involved in it. And again, more to come on that effort in the new year. Any questions on CRRs?
No questions.
All right, thank you, Brenda. So next up, we've got our resource adequacy working group, which just published an issue paper in mid-November, and then had already a stakeholder meeting to kind of talk through that and get that going. So this effort, again, is going to be kicking off a series of weekly, almost weekly working groups in the new year, really kind of trying to be transparent and working through, kind of in that transition from issue paper to getting to a straw proposal, wanting to take time to kind of think through some of those issues and feedback that were raised and gathered on the issue paper in terms of translating that into a straw proposal. And so I believe that, so that will be on, we've got the 3 tracks laid out here on the slide in terms of the different topic areas. I think the working groups will be kind of each focused on a given topic area, so you can know when to tune in if you're particularly interested in one versus the other. Again, this is an initiative that is focused on the CAISO balancing area in terms of the RA administering the RA tariff in that sense. So the track 1 is focused on a UCAP design, as well as loss of load expectation modeling. Track 2 really closely intertwined with track 1 in a way, but really focused on outage and substitution and availability and performance incentives, thinking about our current RAIN product. Track 3 focused on backstop reform as well as visibility into available backstop capacity. And then there are also a few topics on RA that don't necessarily have a home in one of these 3 tracks, but that we'll be continuing to talk about in a working group at some point in next year to kind of continually assess if those, how to move forward on those topics as well. Any questions on resource adequacy?
No questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Brenda. So here we wanted to highlight the policy initiative catalog and roadmap effort. The 2024 final policy roadmap is being released this month. It'll be presented at the to the board and governing body at that meeting next week, at the joint meeting next week. That will show our policy initiative work plan for the next 3 years, and wanted to highlight that that will include 3 new policy initiatives. Congestion revenue rights is one of those, which we actually already kicked off in November. The second of those new initiatives will be on demand response, distributed energy resources, and biddable and participating demand. And then the third of those new topics, again, which we already touched on, is the storage design and modeling effort, really kind of that next storage conversation, moving on from the storage effort that we just wrapped up and had a tariff filing at FERC about, which will continue conversation on some issues related to bid cost recovery in particular, but in a more comprehensive way and looking more broadly as well as at interactions between various issues. So wanted to highlight those new initiatives. And then as well, the catalog and roadmap process itself will begin again in January of next year in terms of looking for stakeholder submissions of policy initiative proposals, as that's a recurring effort. And so even though we're in December here now, publishing a final roadmap, looking ahead the next 3 years, that catalog and roadmap process itself will be starting afresh in the new year and looking for input from stakeholders as to what's on your mind now compared to January of last year. All right.
Okay. Let's go take Alva's hand. Go ahead.
All right, Alva, you're unmuted.
Hi, Becky. The initiative on demand response, distributed energy resources, and biddable participating demand, in particular, the biddable participating demand piece, I don't recall having seen anything on this in the past. Is there something you can refer me to, or will there be some form of white paper put out before that begins to meet, so we know what's actually being talked about there?
That's a good question. I believe that some of this may have come up in the catalog process, but I would need to confirm and confer with Amelia. But one example of this is the hydrogen electrolyzers, where I know hydrogen is a big topic. It's a topic that I think is on our radar as coming soon to California, in particular, and so wanting to work through that, maybe as well as California Department of Water Resources pumping load, thinking about their participation in the markets. As to whether there's going to be a white paper before those that stakeholder initiative gets started, I'm not sure about that. Only because we do plan to start this initiative in a sort of a working group posture, where where we've got a number of catalog items in particular that we're proposing to scope in, but really wanting to have that be open in terms of stakeholders, getting input from stakeholders as to what would they like to see worked on in this space, and thinking about prioritizing among those many many topics in this space. I'll highlight that I think it is going to be an initiative that will span the broader regional market, thinking about demand and distributed energy participation across the West, and how that can participate in the market, as well as programs, for instance, in California that have already been participating in the market, or resources that may want to I guess coordinating with sort of PUC programs in terms of is there RA credit for these types of resources and things like that. So it will be a pretty big space, but I can follow up with you in terms of what do we plan to publish prior to getting the conversations going in terms of telegraphing what we see as in scope and so forth. I'm sure there will be some materials, just not sure if it'll be a white paper at this stage, or whether we're sort of more in a listening posture, where we may not want to, say, here is the scope. We may, kind of want to work that with stakeholders.
I see.
But yeah, happy to follow up there.
And when you mentioned the hydrogen and the pumps, I was wondering whether you're also thinking of like data centers and AI sorts of things being included under that.
Great question. I think it's probably fair game. I may not be the best person to answer that, but I would suspect that's certainly fair game.
Sounds like it could be pretty important. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yes, thanks, Alva.
No more questions, Becky.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. I think the next slide is, yes, here's our graphic showing the existing initiatives that we have going on and how we see the work for those progressing in 2025. So we've touched on most of these initiatives already. And we can go to the next page. I believe there's a second half of the table here. Great, thank you. Again, I think we've talked through most of these, but here you see the work as it's sort of laid out from policy development to implementation, getting darker shades of green. And then on the next slide, we have similar tables thinking about 2025 work for our new initiatives that will be kicking off, where you see the work of that progressing throughout the year in 2025. And I think with that, that's all I have for the update, unless there's any final questions.
I don't see any questions, Becky, at this time. I did add a few links on the chat for those who are following us on the WebEx. So we did post just now the 2024 final policy initiatives roadmap and dispositions. That's a notice that has been sent out already, as well as the spreadsheet that Becky just covered. That's also available as Appendix A. So you can also look at that at your own time to see it on a more closer level. But at this time, I think I don't have any more questions that I see for our teams here. So thank you so much, Becky, for your portion of your presentation. It was really helpful for folks who are following us through the policy roadmap. And all our initiatives that we're tracking here within the policy team and stakeholder affairs and a bunch others. We will go ahead and just move on one more topic. Release plan update. Trang Vo is not here today, but she has asked me to let you all know that the next upcoming release user group will be on Thursday, December 19th at 3 p.m. at the release plan update. And that would include a few items that we're tracking for the upcoming year, market simulation questions, as well any other items that are part of the release for the upcoming winter and also for the upcoming independent releases that are for the 2025. So that would be following on the 19th. So we have also that, we also have another meeting that 19th, which is the customer partnership group for the congestion revenue rights upgrade project call. That monthly call that we meet every month to discuss our CRR project will also cover a production cutover schedule, market simulations, checklist, project timeline schedule, and then a training update. But the new time for this meeting, it will be at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So that notice also went out a few days ago for those folks who are following us on that meeting. We do have a meeting in that morning for price formation enhancements. So we moved a few meetings around so we make sure our stakeholders able to meet for all those meetings, one after the other. And this call is also will also be recorded. So we'll be posting that recording after that call. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we do have the ISO glossary that has just been updated with a notice a few weeks ago. This also reflects something in the BPM library. So if you're seeing a few acronyms within our meetings or any of the posting of our documents, we do have a glossary that shows those definitions and also in the ISO tariff. So it's really helpful for myself and others who are following us on that. And then lastly, but not least, as I mentioned, the 2024 annual policy roadmap has been published. We do look forward for those folks who are following us on this to review it. There is a lot of good material that just got posted this morning. Thanks so much for Amelia, Alyssa, and Becky and her team for helping provide those documents and providing it for us as a work planned out for 2025, 2027. As well, we are really helpful that this is just a briefing call we'll have next week. And then also we are anticipating a call next month, January 30th, to kind of kick things off for 2025. And that means that we will be hopefully taking in any comments and questions within the process. But at this time, we did most of the work, and our stakeholders should be familiar with the material since we have been showing this the past year actually on the prioritization, discretionary initiatives, and so forth. So hopefully that helps. And I did see one question from Daniel, and his question is if there is a question in relation to the CR CPG that will be discussed. Would that be discussed in today's market simulation conference call? That's a good question. We do tend to, they do tend to highlight a little bit high level what they're going to discuss. I don't know if Jeremy Malakas will be on that call, but most likely if he is, he'll showcase the same material for the next one. But that call will also be recorded as well. But the CR CPG will dive in more deeply on the month-to-month layout of this market simulation and the plan dates. So hopefully, Daniel, that answers your question. And then so upcoming next forums that we have is our Market Performance and Planning Forum from March 12th. It's tentatively scheduled. We do have one coming on June 26th, followed by September 18th, and then December 11th. So we make sure these dates align with a lot of other meetings that are not conflicting, so we make sure our audience and our speakers are able to attend. But if you do see any questions or topics that you're really interested, please let us know. ISO Stakeholder Affairs at CAISO.com. We'll be able to maybe include a few topics on that. But as we move to 2025, we are seeing a lot more meetings that are more focused. So be sure to keep a lookout on the ISO calendar. And then when you click on the ISO calendar, you'll see more material of that, is exactly what's being discussed for that meeting. So that's a new feature on the website. And now I will go ahead and close our call. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us. We peaked at 100 attendees, and I hope everyone has a happy holidays. Thanks to our presenters, speakers, and everyone. Hopefully have a safe travels. And then also just want to thank Ryan, my event producer, for helping us out, and everyone else for providing their material on a timely and have any questions and providing great dialogue. We'll have a great day. Thank you so much. I'll have Ryan close my call now. Thank you.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Teller Event Services. You may now disconnect.